The Coming People by Charles F. Dole. Chapter 1. The Prophecy. Quotes beginning Chapter 1. I would write for young people, and for those who never mean to grow old, who wish for plentiful life, for life that shall not only be rich and joyous, but true, pure, honorable, noble, and reverent. Second quote. I would show what such life is, here and now. End of quotes. The prophecy is to be found in one of the most beautiful and familiar passages in all literature. It is one of the verses known as the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Often this is not really believed to be prophecy at all. In fact, most readers regard the whole passage as beautiful, like a cluster of pearls, but they have no use for these pearls except to look at them. Who takes the Beatitudes seriously, as matters of fact? Who stops to ask whether they are true? Who believes that they may have any reasonable place in the life of modern men? The fact is, the somewhat ancient language needs to be translated into the living style of speech, such as Jesus doubtless always used. Let us translate our prophecy, then, so as to see what it meant to those who heard it first. Let us read for blessed, happy, or fortunate. Let us rid ourselves of that word meek, which has come to bear an ignoble sense. The word has been spoiled by keeping company with too many passive, inoffensive, lifeless, colorless creatures. What active mind ever wishes to be meek? What Anglo-Saxon father or mother wishes a child to be meek? Let us choose a word that shall make Jesus' meaning live again. We will say kind, or gentle, or friendly. Blessed or happy are the kind people. Or if you choose, happy are the true gentlemen and gentlewomen. See now what Jesus ventures to predict of these gentle people. He does not content himself with saying what anyone would expect, that they shall win heaven. But he asserts that they shall inherit the earth. That is, in plain words, these are the coming people. The days will come when the gentle and friendly people will cover and hold the world. There was never a bolder prediction than this. Nothing, in fact, better illustrates what that much misunderstood person, the prophet, really is. The prophet is the man who sees in advance the march of law. The astronomer, foreseeing an eclipse, is a prophet. He catches sight of the plan and construction of the universe. He sees its unity of design. From what is now, his eye runs on to what must be, centuries ahead. So with the man who discerns the moral and spiritual laws that bind the world of men and construct the fabric of human society. The prophet discerns the lines upon which society must move. He catches the difference between the transient and the permanent. Long ago, standing on his mountaintop, he could see the stars that would still be shining on men, ages after all the kings, the warriors, the priests of his day had passed into dust. Thus, in an age of blood and war, when the fame of conquerors was in all men's mouths, when human sacrifices had not yet ceased to be offered on the altars of the great capitals of the ancient civilization, when the type of human prosperity was coarse, brutal, arrogant, when woman was a slave or a plaything, underneath the outward confusion, great seers traced the deeper necessary laws of a nobler life to come. They foresaw a world which should actually have no further use for fighters, or bloody sacrifices, or gorgeous temples and rituals. They foresaw a time when pride, arrogance, cruelty, hate would be put behind man as so much barbarism. Great truths often come in parables and by picture language. There is a marvelous outward parable, or rather a series of wonderful parables that illustrate and enforce the teachings of the prophets concerning the future of men, and the race that is bound by divine destiny to win the supremacy of the world. Science, peering backward into the dim past, tells us of a vast period when gigantic creatures, saurians and mastodons, possessed the earth. Would it not have seemed wild prophecy if an archangel from heaven, watching the sports, the fury, and the carnage of those gross brutes, should have even guessed that the whole monstrous race would pass away to make room for the smaller and comparatively feeble creatures of our present time? Or, when the cavemen struggled with wild beasts in every forest, what a strange venture it would have seemed to predict that, in after times, the wild animals would cease from the earth, and only gentle creatures, tame and friendly to man, his pets and his servants, the oxen, the sheep, the horses, would prevail. Nevertheless, to the eye of intelligence, such prophecies would have seemed from the first to be only manifest destiny. As Mr. John Fiske has remarked, there came a Waterloo as soon as the earlier reptilian creatures met the new and higher order of mammals. The animal that suckled its young was better than the beasts that had no care for their own offspring. The intelligence that bound even a pack of wolves together to hunt their prey was more significant than the mere size of the mammoth. At every stage, whenever the finer, more intellectual type appeared, there was the type which the angel or the prophet, watching the majestic procession and order of life, must have foreseen would prevail. There was not only a law of progress that gave to tiny man, with his wits, his skill, and his bow and arrows, precedence over the great beast around him. There was also a deep law touching the uses to which creatures could be put. To the eye of intelligence, it might have appeared generations ago that the wild and fierce creatures had no large and universal usefulness. Man had now come as the master of the earth. The wild creatures were his enemies, killing his flocks and herds. For the tame things he had ever larger and more imperative uses. For the wild animals he had always less use. It would not have required more than clear understanding 100 years ago for the Indian huntsman to become a prophet, and to foretell to his tribe what was already beginning to come about. The forests were being swept away. The area of tillage and pasture was stretching always farther away from the sea. There would not be any more room for the bears and the wolves. The fur-bearing creatures would perish before the devouring sawmill. By and by, where the buffaloes roamed, the white man's sheep and cattle would possess the land. In the presence of millions of men, with the select creatures which offer manifold and vast uses, the wild beasts, and even the wild men with few or no uses, must inevitably disappear. Thus, in a world once wholly wild, a scene of ceaseless strife and blood, the tame and gentle creatures have won their way, and already largely inherit the earth. Our museums and zoological gardens have to seek far to find specimens for science to study, to satisfy curiosity, or to amuse our children. We even begin to wonder if the great world will be quite so picturesque and interesting when all the tigers and lions are exterminated, and the very jungles will be drained and made to bear harvest of rice. So safe have we become from man's ancient enemies that we are hardly ready to part with them altogether. Here indeed is a strange series of parables to show how in man's outward world already the meek inherit the earth. Is it not plain that the prophet ages ago would not have made a mere random guess, but rather a scientific prediction within the realm of law, and foretelling, contrary to all appearances, that the peaceful, timid sheep were better and more enduring than panthers and wildcats? So when the first just and friendly man appeared upon the earth, from that day a fatal Waterloo was visible for all the men of pride and fraud and blood. Here was a new type of man, finer, superior, more intelligent. Here was a man under whose hands the overruling power was to bring a whole train of larger uses. The wild man that had been was strong to destroy, but he was not strong to build and construct. The arrogant conqueror might, indeed, compel men to accept a despotism, with its unstable equilibrium resting upon the merely temporary basis of serfdom. But the just and friendly man would weld cities and nations together. The righteous, obedient, merciful man was the precursor of the republic, with its mutual obligations and its liberties. Surely the inferior type of man must disappear. Less and less could he meet the conditions of existence. The superior type of man must survive. This was Jesus' prophecy, rising out of the perception of a universal law. This thought of Jesus showed marvelous insight. To look beneath the surface and to catch sight of the working of mighty principles, to see the simplicity of the law beneath the diversity of its operation, to look beyond masses of bulky material and conceive the unity of the builder's plan. This is genius, always rare and costly. We call it, therefore, a very wonderful thing that first an unknown psalmist uttered the prophecy that the coming race must be the race of the gentle, and that, generations later, the clear spiritual genius of Jesus singled out this earlier word and wrote it anew, where men must forever read it, become familiar with it, and hold it as a shining ideal. It will be my purpose in the next chapter to show to how large an extent, far greater than the world generally supposes, the remarkable prophecy has already become true. End of chapter 1.